You think you know what sacrifice looks like? Wait until you hear what this man gave up in secret, and what his family only found out after they put him in the ground. They buried Henry Osei on a Tuesday afternoon, and not one person in that church shed a tear. His wife sat in the front pew with dry eyes. His 2 sons sat beside her, checking their phones. His daughter didn't come at all. The pastor gave a short sermon. The choir sang one hymn. And then, just as the pallbearers stood to carry the casket out, the church screen flickered on. Henry's face appeared, and his voice, calm, steady, the voice of a man who had been rehearsing this moment for months, filled the room. What he said in the next 14 minutes made every person in that building stop breathing. Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? New York, London, maybe South Africa or Jamaica? We want to know. Now, you might be wondering why a man's own family wouldn't cry at his funeral. What kind of man earns that? What did he do, or what did they think he did, to deserve a dry-eyed burial? Let me tell you, because the answer is going to tear you apart. Because Henry Osei was the best man in that room, and nobody knew it until he was gone. Let me tell you about Henry. Henry Osei was 64 years old when he died. He was an average-looking man, and I say that with love, because Henry's averageness was part of his gift. 5'8", 170 pounds, medium build, medium face, medium everything. The kind of man you could stand next to in a grocery store line and forget 5 minutes later. He had dark brown skin, a round face, soft eyes behind glasses that were always slightly crooked because one of the nose pads had fallen off 3 years ago, and Henry never replaced it. He kept the glasses balanced with a small piece of tape on the left side. It wasn't that he couldn't afford new glasses. It was that Henry didn't spend money on himself. Ever. For anything. He wore the same rotation of clothes, 3 pairs of khaki pants, 5 button-down shirts in muted colors, 1 pair of brown shoes that he resold twice instead of replacing. His watch was a Casio, the basic kind, the digital one that costs $15 at Walmart, the kind teenagers wear ironically. Henry wore it sincerely. It told the time. That was enough. Henry lived in a modest house in Decatur, Georgia, a 3-bedroom brick ranch on a quiet street with a cracked driveway and a lawn that he mowed himself every Saturday morning. The house was paid off. Henry had paid off the mortgage 11 years early, making double payments every month for 15 years. A fact he never told his wife because the payments came from an account she didn't know about, which is part of this story and part of the secret that would eventually break the room open. Henry worked as an accountant. Not a glamorous accountant, not the kind who works for celebrities or Fortune 500 companies. Henry was a staff accountant at a mid-sized logistics firm in Atlanta called Trans-South Freight. He had worked there for 31 years. Same desk, same office, same parking spot, 3rd row, 5th from the left, next to the dumpster because nobody else wanted it, and Henry didn't mind the smell. He arrived at 7:30 every morning. He left at 5:30 every evening. He ate lunch at his desk, a sandwich he made at home, turkey and mustard on wheat bread, every single day for 31 years, which tells you everything about Henry and also makes you wonder about the inner life of a man who eats the same sandwich 11,315 times. Henry was quiet, not shy, quiet. There is a difference. Shy people want to talk but can't. Quiet people can talk but choose not to. Henry chose silence the way other people choose words, deliberately, with purpose, knowing that what he didn't say was often more important than what he did. He spoke at meetings when spoken to. He answered questions with precision and brevity. He did not gossip. He did not complain. He did not participate in office politics. He existed in that company the way a load-bearing wall exists in a building. Invisible, essential, and completely taken for granted. Now, let me tell you about his family, because this is where it gets hard to hear. Henry's wife was named Eunice. She was 62, a handsome woman with sharp features and sharper opinions. Eunice was not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. She was not cruel. She was disappointed. There is a difference, but the effect on the person living with it is often the same.
Eunice had married Henry when they were both 26. He was a junior accountant, she was a receptionist at a dental office.
They were in love. The real kind, the young kind, the kind that believes everything will work out because it has to. But 36 years of marriage had worn the love down to something that looked more like tolerance. Eunice tolerated Henry's quietness. She tolerated his khaki pants and his Casio watch and his turkey sandwiches. She tolerated the fact that he never took her on vacations, never bought her jewelry, never surprised her with anything that sparkled or impressed. What Eunice didn't know, what nobody knew, was why. Their oldest son was named Kenneth. He was 34, an investment banker in Midtown Atlanta, the kind of man who wore tailored suits and drove a leased BMW and used words like portfolio and leverage in casual conversation. Kenneth was embarrassed by his father.
He never said it outright, but it was there, in the way he avoided bringing colleagues to the house, in the way he introduced Henry as, "My dad, he's in accounting," with that slight downward inflection that turned the word accounting into an apology. Their second son was named David. He was 31, a personal trainer who lived in Buckhead and spent more money on supplements than Henry spent on clothes in a year. David's relationship with Henry was simple. He needed money. He called when he needed money. He visited when he needed money. The rest of the time, David was a ghost. Their daughter was named Abigail. She was 28, lived in New York, worked in fashion marketing, and had not spoken to Henry in 2 years. The reason, as far as Eunice understood it, was that Henry had refused to co-sign a lease on an apartment in Manhattan. The apartment cost $4,000 a month. Abigail wanted Henry to guarantee it. Henry said no.
Abigail said, "You have never supported me in anything," which was the kind of statement that is both completely false and completely felt, and she stopped taking his calls. Henry died of a heart attack on a Saturday morning. He was in the garage, organizing his tools. Wrenches, screwdrivers, a level, a tape measure, all hung on a pegboard he had built himself. Eunice found him at noon, lying on the concrete floor, his hand resting on a toolbox, his glasses crooked, the Casio watch still counting seconds on his wrist. The paramedics said he probably died instantly. He was alone. He was always alone. The funeral was held 4 days later at Greater Hope Community Church. The turnout was modest, about 60 people. Co-workers from Trans South who felt obligated. Neighbors who felt they should. A few people from the church who remembered Henry as the man who sat in the back pew every Sunday, never sang loud enough for anyone to hear, and put a folded bill in the collection plate without looking at the amount. Nobody cried. Not because they were holding back, because there was nothing to hold back. Henry had been so invisible, so aggressively, deliberately, stubbornly invisible, that his absence didn't tear a hole in anyone's sky. The sky just looked the same. The pastor, Reverend Mitchell, gave a brief sermon. He talked about Henry's faithfulness, his reliability, his quiet nature. He used the word steady 4 times. He used the word humble 3 times. He did not use the word extraordinary because nobody, including the pastor, believed it applied. The choir sang Amazing Grace. Eunice sat with her hands folded. Kenneth checked his email. David looked at the time. Abigail's chair was empty. And then the screen came on.
It was mounted on the wall behind the pulpit, a flat screen the church used for announcements and hymn lyrics. Nobody had planned for it to turn on. Nobody had scheduled a video. But Henry had. 3 months before he died, Henry had visited Reverend Mitchell's office and given him a USB drive. He said, "Pastor, when I die, I need you to play this at my funeral, after the sermon, before they carry me out. Please." Reverend Mitchell had put the USB drive in his desk drawer and forgotten about it until that morning when he was organizing his notes and found it in an envelope labeled, "For my funeral, Henry O.C." The screen flickered, static, then Henry's face. He was sitting in the garage. The pegboard was behind him. He was wearing a khaki shirt and his crooked glasses and his Casio watch. He looked into the camera the way he looked at everything, quietly, steadily, without performance. "Hello," he said. If you're seeing this, then I'm gone.
And I imagine the church is not very full, and nobody is very sad. And that's okay. I didn't give you much reason to be. I was quiet. I know that. I didn't say the things I should have said. I didn't show the things I should have shown. I kept everything locked inside. And I know that looked like I didn't care. But I need you to know. I need you to hear this from my own mouth because I couldn't say it when I was alive. I cared. More than you ever knew. More than I ever showed. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. The room was still. 60 people, motionless. Kenneth's phone was in his lap. He had stopped scrolling. Eunice's hands were still folded, but her knuckles were white. Henry continued. Eunice, my wife, 36 years. You married a quiet man, and I know that wasn't what you wanted. You wanted someone who brought you flowers and surprised you with trips and told you every day that you were beautiful. I should have done that. I didn't.
Not because I didn't think you were beautiful. I have thought you were the most beautiful woman in the world since the day I saw you at the dental office in 1988. I didn't say it because I was afraid. Afraid that if I opened that door, the door to all the things I felt, everything else would come out too. The fear, the worry, the weight. And I didn't want to put any of that on you. Eunice's hands unfolded. She pressed them flat on her knees. Her chin trembled. You asked me once why I never took you on vacation. You said, Henry, we have money. Why won't you spend it? And I said, we're fine. That was a lie. Not about the money. About being fine. I wasn't fine. I was working on something. Something I couldn't tell you about because I needed it to be finished before you saw it. Henry paused. He looked down at his hands. The hands of an accountant. Soft, unblistered. The hands of a man who moved numbers instead of bricks. 31 years ago, when Kenneth was born, I made a promise to myself. I promised that my children would never worry about money the way my parents worried. My father worked at a gas station in Kumasi until he died at 51. My mother sold bread at the market until her knees gave out. They had nothing. They gave me everything they had, which was nothing. And somehow it was enough to get me to America. But I watched them suffer. I watched my mother wrap her knees in rags because she couldn't afford a doctor. I watched my father count coins on the kitchen table every night, moving them from one pile to another, trying to make enough become enough. Henry's voice cracked. Just slightly. The first crack in the dam. I swore that my children would never count coins, and I kept that promise. But the way I kept it, the way I did it, cost me everything else. He reached off camera and picked up a folder. A thick folder stuffed with papers. This is what I've been doing for 31 years. He opened the folder. He held up the first document. Kenneth, this is the deed to a house in Brookhaven. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a yard. I bought it 8 years ago for $310,000. It's paid off. It's worth $540,000 now. It's in your name. I've been paying the mortgage from a separate account that I funded by working overtime every Saturday for 8 years. You didn't know about the overtime because I told Eunice I was going to the hardware store. I'm sorry for lying. But the house is yours. You don't need the BMW apartment in Midtown anymore. You have a home. Kenneth made a sound. A strangled, choked sound. His phone slid off his lap and hit the floor. He didn't pick it up. Henry held up the second document. David, this is the deed to a commercial property on Peachtree Industrial. It's a 2,000 square foot space, fully built out for a gym, equipment included. I bought it used from a gym that closed in Duluth. It's not fancy, but it's yours. Your own gym. Your name on the door. I know you've been wanting this since you were 25. I know you asked me for money 3 times and I said no. I said no because I was buying you this instead. I didn't want to give you money. I wanted to give you a future. David stood up in the pew. He took 1 step toward the screen, then stopped. His face was shattered. The tough guy armor of a personal trainer cracked wide open, revealing the boy underneath. The boy who thought his father didn't believe in him. Daddy, David whispered. The word came out before he could stop it. A 31-year-old man in a church pew whispering, Daddy, at a screen. Henry held up the third document. Abigail. The empty chair in the front row seemed to get emptier.
Abigail, I know you're not here. I know you stopped talking to me 2 years ago because I wouldn't co-sign your lease.
You said I never supported you.
I want you to know, and I want everyone in this room to hear this. I have supported you every day of your life. Every single day. He held up a bank statement, a savings account, in Abigail's name. When you were born, I opened this account. I put in $50 every month, for 28 years. With compound interest, the balance is now $211,000. I never touched it. I never told you about it. I was going to give it to you on your 30th birthday. I wanted to sit you down and say, Abigail, this is 28 years of your father believing in you. Every month, even the months when I had to eat turkey sandwiches for dinner because the budget was tight, I put $50 in this account. Because you are worth investing in. You always were. He set the bank statement down. He took off his glasses.
He cleaned them on his shirt, the same gesture he had made 10,000 times. The gesture Eunice and the children knew as well as they knew their own names. He put the glasses back on, crooked, the tape visible, and he looked into the camera. I didn't co-sign your lease, Abigail, because $4,000 a month for an apartment is not an investment. It's a cage with nice wallpaper. I wanted better for you. I wanted you to use the money I saved to build something, a business, a home, a life that belongs to you, not to a landlord. The room was silent. 60 people. Not one breath audible. Henry picked up one more document. This one was different. Not a deed, not a bank statement. A letter. Handwritten. Several pages. Eunice, he said. His voice was softer now. The voice he used at home, late at night, when the house was dark and quiet and he thought she was asleep. This is for you. He read the letter. Dear Eunice, I have loved you for 36 years. I have loved you every morning when you made coffee, 2 sugars, a little cream, even though you never knew I watched you do it from the hallway. I loved you when you danced in the kitchen to Anita Baker when you thought nobody was home. I loved you when you fell asleep on the couch reading your romance novels, and I carried you to bed and you never woke up. I loved you in the quiet way that quiet men love, without fireworks, without performances, without the grand gestures you deserved, but I couldn't make myself do because every dollar I didn't spend on flowers was a dollar I put toward the children's futures. Eunice was crying. Finally. The dam broke. Not gently, violently. 36 years of believing her husband didn't care. 36 years of tolerating a man she thought had no passion, no ambition, no fire. All of it collapsing at once as she watched him on a screen, already dead, already buried, telling her the truth he couldn't tell her when he was alive. I bought you something, Henry said on the screen. He held up a key, a brass key on a chain.
This is the key to a house, in Savannah, near the beach. You told me 30 years ago, on our 5th anniversary, at that restaurant on Peachtree that doesn't exist anymore. You told me your dream was to live near the ocean. You said, Henry, I just want to hear the waves. I never forgot that. I bought the house 4 years ago. Small, 2 bedrooms, a porch that faces the water. I've been renovating it on Saturdays. The Saturdays I told you I was at the hardware store. I was in Savannah, building you a house near the waves. Eunice's hand went to her mouth. She stood up. She sat down. She stood up again. Kenneth reached for her arm. She gripped his hand so hard her knuckles went white. Henry set the key down. He looked into the camera one last time. I know I was quiet. I know I was boring.
I know my sandwiches were the same, and my clothes were the same, and my watch was cheap, and my glasses were crooked.
I know I looked like a man who didn't care about anything, but I cared about everything. I just showed it in the wrong language. I showed it in numbers and bank statements and deeds and mortgage payments, instead of words and hugs and flowers and trips. I showed it in the language of an accountant, not the language of a husband. And by the time I realized that, by the time I understood that love isn't a balance sheet, it's a conversation, I was sitting in this garage, recording this video, because my heart is telling me I don't have much time left. His voice broke. Fully. The crack became a chasm. I love you. All of you. I loved you in every sandwich I made and every overtime shift I worked, and every Saturday I spent in Savannah with a hammer in my hand and sawdust in my hair, building a porch so my wife could hear the waves. I love you in the house in Brookhaven, and the gym on Peachtree Industrial, and the savings account with 28 years of $50 deposits. I love you in a language you couldn't hear. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't learn your language sooner. I'm sorry I let you think I didn't care. I'm sorry I was so busy providing for your future that I forgot to be present in your present. He paused. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The Casio watch caught the garage light. Please don't be sad. Please don't feel guilty. Just take what I built. Live in the houses, open the gym, use the savings, hear the waves. And every now and then, when you're eating a turkey sandwich or checking your watch or mowing the lawn on a Saturday morning, think of me. Not with sadness, with the knowledge that you were loved. Every single day. By a quiet man who didn't know how to say it, but who meant it. With everything he had. The screen went black. The church was destroyed.
There is no other word for it. 60 people demolished. Women in the back pews were sobbing. Men were wiping their eyes with the backs of their hands. The co-workers from Trans South, the ones who had walked past Henry's desk for 31 years without ever asking about his life, were staring at the blank screen with expressions of shock and shame. Kenneth was bent over in the pew, his face in his hands, his shoulders heaving. The son who was embarrassed by his father. The son who introduced him as, "My dad, he's in accounting," with that downward inflection. That son was broken open, and what was inside was not embarrassment but grief. The specific, lacerating grief of a person who realizes too late that the person they dismissed was the person who loved them most. David was standing in the aisle, tears streaming, his mouth repeating, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," in a whisper that nobody could hear but everyone could see. Eunice was on her knees, not figuratively, literally on her knees, on the church floor, in her black dress, holding the edge of the pew with both hands. Her body was shaking. 36 years. 36 years of thinking her husband was just an accountant who ate turkey sandwiches and didn't care. 36 years of not knowing that every Saturday he drove to Savannah to build her a porch. 36 years of being loved in a language she couldn't hear. Reverend Mitchell stood at the pulpit. He tried to speak. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He closed it. He looked at the congregation. He looked at the casket. He said the only thing that seemed right. Henry Osei loved his family the way he lived his life. Quietly, completely, without asking for credit, without expecting applause. He was not a loud man. He was not a flashy man. He was a man who built things in secret and gave them away in silence. And the tragedy, the real tragedy, is not that he's gone. It's that he was here, all along, doing this. And none of us saw it. None of us looked closely enough. None of us listened. The Reverend paused. Henry showed love the way a foundation holds a house. You can't see it, but without it, everything falls down. He stepped away from the pulpit. The choir didn't sing. The organ didn't play. The pallbearers stood. They lifted the casket. Kenneth walked beside it. David walked beside it. Eunice walked behind it, holding the brass key in her hand. The key to a house in Savannah, near the ocean, with a porch Henry built on Saturdays. They carried Henry Osei out of the church and into the November light. The sky was gray, the air was cold, and 60 people who had walked in with dry eyes walked out unable to see through their tears. 3 weeks later, Eunice drove to Savannah. Kenneth went with her. David followed in his car. They found the house, a small blue cottage on a quiet street, 2 blocks from the beach. White shutters. A garden with roses. The bushes were young, recently planted, still growing. And a porch. A wide, beautiful porch that faced the water, with 2 rocking chairs and a small table between them. Eunice walked onto the porch. She sat in one of the rocking chairs. She heard the waves. Distant, steady, the sound of water meeting sand, over and over, the same sound it had been making for millions of years. She closed her eyes.
I can hear them, Henry, she whispered. I can hear the waves. Kenneth found a note taped inside the kitchen cabinet, behind the shelf where the glasses would go. Henry's handwriting, small, precise, the handwriting of an accountant. Eunice, the coffee maker is already installed. 2 sugars, a little cream, the way you like it. H. Kenneth set the note on the counter. He walked to the porch. He sat in the other rocking chair. He looked at his mother. She was crying, but the tears were different now. Not grief tears. Something else. Something warmer.
He built this, Kenneth said.
Every Saturday, Eunice said, for 4 years. While we thought he was at the hardware store. While we thought he didn't care. They sat on the porch and listened to the waves. Mother and son. 2 rocking chairs. The gray November sky turning to blue. David arrived an hour later. He walked onto the porch and stood between the 2 chairs and put one hand on his mother's shoulder and one hand on his brother's shoulder, and he said nothing, because sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is stand with his family and keep his mouth shut and let the waves do the talking. That evening, Eunice's phone rang. A New York number. Mom? Abigail. Mom, Kenneth sent me the video. I watched it. Mom, I'm on a plane. I'm coming home. She couldn't finish.
The sound on the other end of the line was crying. The deep, ragged, helpless crying of a daughter who spent 2 years not speaking to her father and will now spend the rest of her life wishing she had. Come home, baby, Eunice said. The porch is big enough for all of us. Abigail arrived the next morning. She walked through the front door of the Savannah house and she stopped. She looked at the kitchen, small, clean, a coffee maker on the counter, a note in her father's handwriting. She looked at the living room, 2 chairs, a small table, a window that faced the ocean. She looked at the porch, 2 rocking chairs, now 3, because Kenneth had bought a 3rd one that morning from a shop on Broughton Street. Abigail sat in the 3rd chair. She held the bank statement in her hand, the one Henry had shown on the video. $211,000. 28 years. $50 a month. Every month. Even the hard months. Even the months when Henry ate turkey sandwiches for dinner because the budget was tight. He saved for me, Abigail said. Even after I stopped talking to him, he still put in the $50. He never missed a month, Eunice said. I checked. Not 1 month in 28 years. Abigail pressed the bank statement against her chest. She looked at the ocean. The waves came in. The waves went out. The sound was steady, patient, faithful. Like a man who loved his family in a language they couldn't hear but never stopped speaking. I'm sorry, Daddy, Abigail whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. The waves answered, the way they always answer, with patience, with repetition, with the steady, quiet assurance that the shore will still be there tomorrow, no matter what the tide does today. The 4 of them sat on that porch as the sun went down. Eunice, Kenneth, David, Abigail. 4 rocking chairs now. David had gone back to the shop and bought a 4th. 4 chairs on a porch that Henry built with his own hands, on Saturdays, in secret, for a wife who wanted to hear the waves. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The waves talked. The house talked. The coffee maker on the counter talked. The note in the kitchen cabinet talked. Henry talked. Through every board in the porch, every nail in the wall, every dollar in the savings account, every deed in the folder. Henry Osai, staff accountant, turkey sandwich eater, Casio watch wearer, the most invisible man in any room, spoke louder in death than he ever spoke in life. And what he said was simple. What he said was the oldest, truest, most important thing a person can say. I loved you. Every day. In every way I knew how. I'm sorry it wasn't the way you needed, but it was everything I had. And that's where we'll leave this story. If it touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what lesson did you take from this? See you next time.